The Marvel Cinematic Universe is 11 years in the making. It's 21 movies so far. Avengers Endgame will be the 22nd film. To get to Avengers Endgame, you have to go back to the beginning. You have to go back to one man who started this entire multi-billion-dollar world that has brought superheroes to life on the big screen like never before. Robert Downey Jr. in 2008 became Tony Stark. This was Iron Man. This was something special.
Favorite moment of Iron Man is when Tony Stark finally escapes his captors. You've seen him welding and putting together this kind of MacGyver-esque scrap of armor, and you really want to see what it looks like and if it works, and it's this weird modern take on the classic Iron Man suit as he comes out, flamethrowers, and he looks like an Avengers cover come to life.
My favorite thing about Iron Man would have to be maybe the ending of Iron Man. We have this press conference where Tony is contemplating not telling the world who he is, but then at the last minute, he finally decides to say, "I am Iron Man." We have this post-credit scene where Nick Fury and Tony Stark are introduced to each other, and Nick lets Tony know just by revealing himself as Iron Man, he kind of opened the door to this world that is way bigger than just Tony Stark and Iron Man, and he tells him about the Avengers initiative, and in that, you know, it sets up so much going forward.
But it became an event. Every Marvel movie beyond Iron Man would be an event, and that's because this film was setting the stage for the Marvel Cinematic Universe to introduce a world full of superheroes. We just didn't know it yet.
I just finally know what I have to do.
After Iron Man becomes a big box office success, Marvel Studios tries to jump into the other big challenge of the MCU franchise, taking heroes that other studios had messed up and rebooting them for the MCU. Louis Leterrier made a very competent Hulk film. Edward Norton, who was very good and went deep into the Bruce Banner character, was a little bit too much of an actor's actor, where Marvel Studios need more of a company man. He wrote so much of that Bruce Banner character, it was just not a kind of system he could get into.
One of my favorite moments in the film is when Bruce and Betty are at the university whenever they encounter the military. That's one of the first big fights that we see in the film, whenever the Hulk gets unleashed and you get to see what the Hulk can do.
Oh, the redheaded stepchild of the MCU. The Incredible Hulk, it's really too bad that we don't talk about it a little bit more, because it's got some great stuff in it.
And he's balling up vehicles and he's throwing them across the university grounds.
My favorite moment from The Incredible Hulk is probably the finale, where we actually see Hulk and the Abomination take on each other. It's one of those rare CGI slugfests that actually work.
It's kind of cheesy too. It's over the top. He's ripping off parts of sculptures and he's using them to shield. Blonsky is doing backflips over him and shooting at him the whole time.
I think it's the moment we all wanted to see in Ang Lee's Hulk, but instead we got this big fight with a bunch of dogs.
But I think it's also an important moment, because while it's cool to see the Hulk fight, you also get to see what happens when the Hulk loses control.
When Hulk actually yells out "Hulk smash" in the finale, I mean, that's a great MCU moment.
Hulk smash!
So Iron Man 2 is important to the MCU because Tony Stark, who obviously is Iron Man, we kind of get to see him become a team player. The first movie, he was kind of solo writing it. Now the sequel not only brings in Nick Fury at one point in a donut shop, which is A+, but also has Natasha Romanoff appear. She starts off as a secretary, she's undercover, but then she becomes the Black Widow, who we know and love, and she's super awesome, kicks a bunch of butt and electrocutes everyone.
So Tony Stark decides, hey, I'm gonna go do this European race course thing. And he gets stopped midway through the race by Mickey Rourke of all people, showing up looking like Whiplash.
Tony Stark kind of learns that he can't do this superhero thing by himself.
Tearing into his car, he pulls out the briefcase Iron Man suit, which is honestly one of the coolest transformations of Iron Man we've seen in the entire series. He beat Whiplash pretty handily. And he's like, my whole purpose to go in there was to make you look vulnerable. And now that I have, other people are gonna start swarming in and try to take you down. Tony does just collapse from that point. He does most of destruction to himself, but then people like Justin Hammer come in and you realize, oh wow, Whiplash had a point. He was trying to bring this guy down to show that, hey, you're not this immortal, invincible person, you're just a guy in a suit. And you can be beaten.
So he gets to work with Natasha and Pepper and Rhodey as well, moving forward in this film, which helps culminate into the Avengers.
Unfortunately, the movie doesn't carry this thing the whole way through. This guy gets broken out of prison, there's a lot of ridiculous ad-libbing between him and Justin Hammer, and there's this whole thing about a bird, it doesn't work. but that scene shows they had a decent idea going in.
I've been authorized by Director Fury to use any means necessary to keep you on premises. If you attempt to leave or play any games, I will tase you and watch Super Nanny while you drool into the carpet. Okay?
I think I got it, yeah.
I feel that Thor is important in the MCU because it, first of all, introduces us into Asgard and the Asgardians.
Thank you, Marvel Studios, for casting Chris Hemsworth as Thor.
The best part of Thor, besides his awful blonde bleached eyebrows,
He has the body of a god, honestly.
has to be the introduction of Hawkeye. I know he's not essential to the movie's plot, he's only in one scene, but when Coulson kind of calls the secret weapon and then you see a dude in purple with a bow and arrow, and it's Jeremy Renner, and he's kind of swinging from that basket above Thor, and it's like, this is the Avengers coming together.
And it also introduces us to different characters like Loki, characters like Heimdall, who's the guardian of the Bifrost, and also Odin, who's the king of Asgard.
This is really starting to come together. These are really starting to connect. It was such a launching point in the first act of that movie to then get us excited about what was happening next.
We learn more about Loki going forward, but he plays a big part in Thanos' story arc, and we see a lot of that in the first Avengers movie.
My favorite part of Thor, though, is when Thor went back to try and get his hammer from the site in which he crashed at. It's not only a comical moment, because you have Thor, like, seriously kicking ass in this scene to try and get to his hammer, but then you have a very self-entitled character who thinks that he's gonna get that entitlement back, and he quickly realizes that that's not the case. He's gonna have to change some ways. His dad is really putting him in his place.
You're no match for the mighty!
Captain America the First Avenger is important because it brings in the Tesseract, which is the first one of the Infinity Stones that we see. The other important part is Captain America gets frozen in ice. Howard Stark manages to retrieve the Tesseract, but getting the Tesseract back, he loses Steve Rogers, and Steve Rogers doesn't wake up until conveniently just in time to fight Loki and the Chitauri invasion in Avengers.
So my favorite part of Captain America is actually before he becomes Captain America. It's when Steve Rogers is still skinny. He's having a conversation with Dr. Erskine before he has his program. They talk about the doctor's history in Germany, and they just have a one-on-one conversation about bullies and how good-hearted Steve is, and that it's not the serum that makes him a superhero, it's Steve's heart.
The movie also introduces Sebastian Stan as Bucky Barnes. He dies in this movie.
Cap later learns that Bucky isn't quite as dead as he thought.
Steve Rogers, all of his internal struggle is based around whether he puts his duty as Captain America first or whether he does what he has to do to save his best friend in the world, Bucky Barnes, after his whole world is basically rewritten and he is turned into a terrorist.
I thought you were dead. I thought you were smaller. Cap finally has the last piece of the puzzle to give him the reason that he needs to have a personal connection to the fight for freedom, to fight for America and truth and justice.
You can't give me orders! The hell I can't! I'm a captain!
Avengers is the movie that we were all waiting for. It's kind of the movie that we never thought would happen and was kind of a pipe dream, but then they rolled out Iron Man, and they rolled out Hulk, and they rolled out Captain America and Thor, and holy moly, they put them all together.
Scared of a little lightning? I'm not overly fond of what follows.
Avengers was the first meetup of all these different Marvel Cinematic Universe heroes where you finally get Captain America and Hulk and Thor and Iron Man in the same room together. And after their little skirmish with Loki and Thor, they finally all get together on the helicarrier and confront Nick Fury about his weapons that he's building with the Tesseract. And it's this really cool scene where the camera moves around and kind of shows everyone interacting and bickering at each other. And it's one of those classic superhero tropes where you see the heroes fight against each other, where their personalities mash, and all of a sudden they have to team up with each other to take on this bigger threat.
To me, Avengers is when we truly got the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because you had the post-credit scenes, you had the mentions here, there, and the Easter eggs, but until they were all together, standing around one another, beating up Chitauri and Loki and whatever, that's when it became real.
What just happened? Please tell me nobody kissed me.
Okay, so I love Loki as much as the next fangirl, but my favorite moment in Avengers is when he is about to start monologuing with Hulk at the end, and Hulk just picks him up by his feet and totally wrecks him. Puny God is an iconic line, and honestly, it's one of my favorite moments in the MCU, let alone the movie itself.
Puny God.
The Avengers is the biggest movie in the world when it comes out. It's all of this build up to this big team climactic showdown, and then the MCU has to go, okay, now it's back to the solo movies.
So Iron Man 3 is probably one of the more divisive MCU films we got. There's not a whole lot to like about it, in my opinion.
Well, you do it with an introspective look at Tony Stark. See, this guy was the least equipped for the Battle of New York, and yet he's the one that tries to sacrifice himself to save everybody. He is riddled with PTSD. He's getting panic attacks. He's buried himself in his work. He's pushed out his friends. The dude was not equipped for what happened. So when this super charismatic, dangerous-looking terrorist in the Mandarin shows up, he's not equipped to handle it at all.
This is an unpopular opinion, but I love the Mandarin twist in Iron Man 3. People are bummed that they didn't get the real Mandarin in the movie, but go back and read some of those comics he's in. Turning the Mandarin into a false threat created by some other guy in order to distract the masses from the real problems in the world is probably about the most interesting thing anyone has ever really done with that character.
Don't hurt the face, I'm an actor.
So he flat out tells the guy, hey, come to my address, I'll fight you right now. He sends his guys to go find him, not equipped for what happens, and he winds up in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee, having to deal with his demons with basically none of his technology that he's used so much in these past two movies.
When Iron Man basically rescues the entire crew of Air Force One from dropping to their deaths, it's kind of an amazing shot sequence, and it even ends in a twist where you think he's done it, he saved the day, and then the Iron Man armor gets hit with a truck, but then you find out that Tony Stark was remotely controlling it, and he's not actually dead, and it was kind of fun.
Well, I panicked, but then I handled it.
So if there's one movie in the MCU you can probably skip, it's Thor: The Dark World. It's not a bad movie per se, it's just not a great one. You should at least watch it once. But the only benefit from The Dark World is that we learn about the origin of the Ether, which is the Reality Stone, and it's also the last appearance of Jane Foster, which, depending on how you feel about Natalie Portman, could be a good or bad thing.
There is a moment in Thor: The Dark World where Thor and Loki's mom, spoilers, just been killed. And Thor has to go to Loki, who's sitting in a cell, and ask him for help. And I think we get one of the most iconic lines in the MCU in this moment. Like, you must be truly desperate to come to me for help.
I think pretty much any part in Thor: Dark World that involves Loki is my favorite, just because Hiddleston does such a great job as Loki. But I think one scene that stood out to me was towards the very end when Thor and Loki go away from Asgard and they're encountering Malekith. Thor unchains Loki and you think that they're gonna work together, and then all of a sudden Loki cuts off Thor's arm, or at least it looks that way. But turns out it was all a trick, which is what Loki is known for.
And you think that, oh crap, Loki turned on Thor again. It was a plan they came up with together.
Loki's whole character is built on tricking people, so no matter what he does in the movie, you never know what his true motives are.
He's become this character that fans have sort of come to know and love, and this moment is so cool for what it sets up for other parts of the movie. And I think that the combination of those two scenes really go to show why that Thor-Loki dynamic across the entire MCU is so strong and so compelling. Their relationship makes that movie so much better than I think fans may remember it or experience it, the first time.
I wish I could trust you.
Trust my rage.
Captain America, The Winter Soldier, which is the best film in the MCU, obviously, in my opinion, controversial, I don't care.
Winter Soldier could act as a standalone spy action thriller if you watched it by itself. It also fit beautifully into the MCU and all of those storylines.
The MCU would not be the same without it, mainly because we get the big reveal about Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D.
In Captain America, The Winter Soldier, there's a moment that we all saw in the trailers, if you were watching trailers to this movie, which we all do. But Bucky Barnes, before we know he's Bucky Barnes, catches Captain America's shield. And it's the first time where Captain America seems to have really come up against somebody who can do something like that.
You see Bucky and Steve and Black Widow, all of them, it's this claustrophobic fighting with the action sequences, and seeing that kind of for the first time in the MCU was very promising.
But as the movie goes forward, we kind of see the dismantling of Hydra and the effects that has on future films like Avengers: Age of Ultron.
You realize how emotional this really is because the Winter Soldier is Captain America's best friend, Bucky Barnes, who fell off a train and we thought was dead after the first Avenger. But no one's really dead in the MCU.
Even when I
had nothing, eh, Bucky?
You're going after him.
You don't have to come with me.
I know. When do we start?
Guardians of the Galaxy was the second MCU movie in 2014 after Captain America Winter Soldier, and it was such a vast difference from like this grounded action spy thriller to this big open space opera, and that's something that Marvel hadn't had before. This movie really opened up all the opportunities for the Marvel cosmic universe and introduced characters that audiences didn't really know. I mean, casual audience would know who Captain America or Iron Man or Thor was, but no one had heard of Star-Lord or Gamora or Drax.
You first meet the grown-up version of Star-Lord. He lands on this planet. It's very creepy. You're seeing all these different tech that you kind of haven't seen in the MCU before. You see Chris Pratt. You're not really sure what to think of him, this funny Parks and Rec guy. Is he gonna be able to pull off the Star-Lord character, this space pirate? Puts on his headphones, turns on Awesome Mix 1. He dances, he starts kicking these like dinosaur rat things. It is just such a joyous, fun moment that I think really sets the tone for the rest of the movie.
I mean, now you can't talk about the MCU without talking about what Star-Lord has done or how Gamora plays into this or I Am Groot. You know, it became such an iconic franchise.
Groot, what are you doing? You're not gonna live through this. And Groot just looks at everybody and just goes, "We are Groot." And there is not a dry eye in the audience.
It kind of set that tone in the MCU and showed like, hey, this can be a serious blockbuster and a serious action movie, but it can also be really, really funny and really, really heartfelt and really emotional.
From then on, I was just sold on Guardians.
Hey, Barit.
Barit, look, I'm gonna be totally honest with you. I forgot you're here.
So Avengers Age of Ultron was the much anticipated sequel to the original Avengers. Both were directed by Joss Whedon, so hopes were high. This movie didn't quite meet the high bar that the original Avengers hit, but it was also important in introducing Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. And Scarlet Witch has then gone on to become kind of a very important character. So Quicksilver,
he's fast and she's weird.
Any moment that involves James Spader as Ultron. I think that was probably one of the best weird voice casting decisions that they could have made for Ultron.
One of the other important parts of Ultron is how it actually sets up Captain America Civil War. The Sokovia event, essentially when Ultron tried to raise an entire city.
Everybody has to come together and put aside their differences and their feelings about Tony building a giant robot that's gonna kill everybody.
The fact that Hawkeye was the main hero of that movie is perfect because Hawkeye's the best. Hawkeye #1.
It also sets up an important plot point in Civil War where they're going to have to come to terms with all the collateral damage that they caused by saving the world.
Thor, report on the Hulk.
The gates of hell are filled with the screams of his victims. But not the screams of the dead, of course. No. Wounded screams, mainly whimpering, a great deal of complaining, and tales of sprained deltoids and gout.
So the Marvel Cinematic Universe is wrapping up Phase 2. Avengers Age of Ultron has come and gone, and we're all wondering what's next.
What is Phase 2?
And then they tell us what's next is Ant-Man. Yeah, really, this guy's powers is to shrink to the size of an ant and talk to ants and control them.
Favorite scene is when Ant-Man fights Falcon. It's like nobody wanted to acknowledge the fact that he fought and essentially beat an Avenger. And that was a defining moment for him. And it was kind of a defining moment for me because I was on his side. I was like, yeah, kick butt, man.
It's really important to me that Cap never finds out about this.
Ant-Man, what I love so much about that movie is the relationship between Scott Lang and his daughter Cassie. Because to that point in the MCU, there were so many heroes that wanted to save the world and where they were from, and some of them had love stories, but there wasn't a lot of that sense of family that really helped us connect. You know, that's what made Age of Ultron so great when it brought in Hawkeye's family and allowed us to see kind of what these heroes are like when they're away from work.
This is a heist movie, but it is also a movie which is going to expand the Marvel Cinematic Universe in very interesting ways. Not only is it going to introduce the quantum realm, but it's also going to be a bit of a history lesson with S.H.I.E.L.D. and with the Avengers and different things that we have to learn about to get to Avengers Endgame.
Would you like to try our mango fruit blast?
No thanks. I'll have a burger, please.
Oh, we don't make that.
Pretzel, hot pretzel, like mustard. You have mustard dip?
It's ice cream. Baskin Robbins.
I'll just do like whatever's hot and fresh.
Dude.
So Captain America Civil War is really where phase 3 of the MCU kind of starts to take shape, and you can really see where they're going with it. You have these two sides of the Avengers that start to clash after a terrible accident on one of their missions. You have Iron Man's side, who thinks they should be under government supervision, and you have Captain America's side, who thinks they should be able to do what they think is right, regardless of what the government says.
There's so much going on in Captain America Civil War that it's kind of hard to sometimes pinpoint like one thing that's really great.
Several brawls and chase scenes between them. There's a terrible assassination, alleged to be by the Winter Soldier, where Black Panther's father's killed. Black Panther then enters the MCU for the first time.
But I think for most Marvel fans, the thing that stands out the most was the introduction of Tom Holland's Spider-Man. He got a really great sequence in the airport fight. He was quippy like you wanted Spider-Man to be. Marvel did the Spider-Man action like you've always imagined seeing it. And it was just an all-around great introduction of this character.
So, you're the Spiderling, crime-fighting spider. You're Spider-Boy?
Spider-Man.
You get to see, the introduction of Spider-Man. You get to see Ant-Man. You get to see, Tony Stark. You get to see all these people come together. This was that next level tier of ensemble fighting.
Hawkeye comes back into the fold. You have Scarlet Witch. You have Vision. Black Widow. Everybody's there. And it just kind of results in these giant clash of ideologies for superheroes.
And we get to see all of these people, all of the Avengers work together as a team, but also as individuals.
And this really just rips Tony and Cap apart. Eventually, this leads to the reveal that Winter Soldier, while brainwashed back in the day, actually was responsible for the death of Iron Man's parents. And that just basically frays the relationship between Iron Man and Captain America so far that they're just not talking to each other, basically, by the time we move into the rest of phase 3.
Look, when you can do the things that I can, but you don't, and then the bad things happen, they happen because of you.
There's a moment in Doctor Strange where it just hits you unexpectedly with this beautiful, cinematically beautiful, emotionally beautiful, just set of feelings. And when the Ancient One knows that she's dying, she has now bestowed all of her knowledge on Doctor Strange. He has what it takes to become the Sorcerer Supreme. This cocky, arrogant doctor who has been nothing but full of himself finally is starting to understand what it takes to be a hero.
We finally see the mystical version of the Marvel Universe. It introduces the idea of the multiverse to the larger audience. It also introduced the Time Stone, which turned out to be very important in Infinity War, and later, of course, Endgame.
And this one, we see Doctor Strange do one of the coolest things with the Time Stone, because we see the stones in a lot of movies, but we don't actually see people do a lot of things with them other than like here, and he actually makes a time loop and essentially wins a battle in the most annoying way. It's like if a superhero just poked you in the shoulder to death.
And Doctor Strange realizes how small he is in the world and how much time matters. And being the Sorcerer Supreme is going to be such an important thing, not just for him, but for everybody, for life in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
This is insane.
Yeah.
Where are you going? You tell me the truth?
Well, a powerful sorcerer gave himself over to an ancient entity, convened the very laws of physics, tried very hard to kill me, but I left him chained up in Greenwich Village, and the quickest way back there is through a dimensional gateway that I open up in the mob closet.
Okay, don't tell me. Fine.
The first Guardians was such a surprise. No one expected to fall in love with any of these characters. I mean, Groot, Gamora, Star-Lord, Rocket, Drax, no one cared about these characters. Guardians and James Gunn made us fall in love. Guardians 2 is probably one of the only instances of trying to catch lightning in a bottle twice and maybe getting a little bit.
The opening title sequence to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is one of the best of all time. Watching baby Groot dance around to Mr. Blue Sky while everyone else is just totally fighting for their lives in the background is awesome, and the Matrix-esque kind of visuals that are going on with the slow-mo, it started off the movie on just the right note.
For the majority of Guardians 2, we see Star-Lord meeting his dad, Ego. And Kurt Russell is basically trying to seduce him into joining him in what he's calling the expansion.
Guardians 2 really sort of paved the way for Avengers Infinity War in a sense that the scope of the MCU and just sort of knowing how big space was, but at the same time learning so much about Thanos through Gamora and sort of her relationship with Thanos and Star-Lord's relationship with his dad.
He gets it explained to him that he is part Celestial, that of all of Ego's offspring, he is going to be the one to help him cause the expansion. As Ego is explaining all of this, he says, "I loved your mother, but I had to put a brain tumor in her, and that's why she died." Immediately, all of the conversations just wipe away, all of the signs of the Celestial wipe away from Peter Quill's face, and he just goes, "You what?" His relationship with his mother has been the crux of his entire 2 movies. So to see this and see that he hasn't lost himself is this giant sigh of relief from the audience, while also being really funny. And the way Kurt Russell sells it is great, because he goes, "Oh, come on, Peter, you gotta grow up. Yeah, I killed your mom, so what?" He's like, "Nope, we got a problem."
Listen to me! You are a god. If you kill me, you'll be just like everybody else. What's so wrong with that?
Spider-Man Homecoming is important in the MCU because it's the first full movie that features Spider-Man after we saw his introduction in Civil War.
Tom Holland is the first instance of somebody who I thought really blended the witty nerd aspect of Spider-Man and Peter Parker.
This is the first film where he's the main character, where he has to come to terms with his powers more, and he's using some of Tony Stark's technology to help him do that, but he has to balance it with his normal life while fighting villains like the Vulture.
The moment when Michael Keaton realizes that Peter Parker and Spider-Man are one and the same, and he turns around and he does the sort of, "Hey, you're going to the prom with my daughter, but I'm gonna murder you later." He's so much scarier in that moment than any CGI Vulture wings could make him.
My absolute favorite moment in Spider-Man Homecoming is probably the saddest scene. It's after Spider-Man, Peter Parker has a confrontation with the Vulture. Vulture escapes and he's pinned behind rubble and he can't get out from it. And you just see him turn from this kind of cocky, excited superhero to a really scared 16-year-old high school student. And then he buckles up and remembers all the things that he's learned from Tony, and he's able to push himself up and just says, "Come on, Peter, you can do it, Peter." That kind of scene just broke me, and you really got to see a different side of Peter that wasn't in the mask.
It builds on his relationship with Tony Stark, which plays a major part in later movies and influences Stark's decisions and Peter Parker's.
I just wanted to be like you. And I wanted you to be better.
Thor Ragnarok basically sets up Infinity War. As you'll remember, Infinity War starts with the Asgardians fleeing. Well, they're fleeing from the destruction of Asgard, which happens at the end of the film.
Thor Ragnarok has a lot of good moments for me. I love the comedy about it. I love how funny it was. I feel like we needed a film like that because what was coming shortly after.
Also, Loki, who's involved here, takes the Tesseract from Asgard before it blows up, which is the first stone we see him get in that film. Thor Ragnarok changes the relationship that Thor has with the rest of the cast, with the rest of the characters. He's a lot funnier now.
One of the best moments is when Thor meets Korg. It's like this just weird, as he walks him around this arena, Thor's trying to put everything together, and Korg just keeps talking about just the most random things, and it's the voice, like everything in this moment is just epitomizes what Thor Ragnarok is. It's funny in the most unexpected ways.
You also get the introduction of Valkyrie, who may be very important in Endgame. We don't quite know yet, but she is still alive according to the character posters. We get Jeff Goldblum's Grandmaster. A lot of the Incredible Hulk's arc is played out here for the first time.
My favorite part of Thor Ragnarok would have to be when Hela was over Thor and she was like, "Tell me, what were you the god of again?" And then he goes into this god of thunder mode, and it is amazing.
So Thor and Loki's relationship has been pretty strained for the vast majority of the films. Is he a villain? Is he not? Is he both? In Thor Ragnarok, he functions as both, but mostly as a hero here. He helps Thor out while he's on the world of Sakaar, but when they're actually leaving, he kind of turns against him. And again, this goes right into Infinity War, so that's where we see, Loki talking about being Odin's son and all that sort of stuff. Thor Ragnarok really sets up that relationship and that payoff.
Loki, I thought the world of you. I thought we were going to fight side by side forever, but at the end of the day, you're you and I'm me. And I don't know, maybe there's still good in you, but let's be honest, our paths diverged a long time ago.
So Black Panther is an incredible Marvel film all around, between the acting, the costumes, the characters, the accents. I think it really brings to life this culture, maybe a culture that we haven't necessarily highlighted or recognized as much, not only in this country, but around the world.
I think the thing that stood out to me the most about Black Panther was just the first scenes where we get introduced to Wakanda and like on the challenge day. It basically was the first time I think myself and a lot of other Black people got to see our culture, our roots represented on screen in such a positive and powerful way in a blockbuster movie. You didn't really know how much you needed it until you actually saw it. And once you saw it, you really understood how powerful of a vision that was, and it was really a game changer.
I love the ending of Black Panther. They open the outreach program in the very same building where Killmonger's father died, and it feels like the perfect conclusion to the thing that the movie wrestles with, which is, can we tell stories just in this fantasy world, or do we owe it to our audience to address reality as well? And they kind of decide that Wakanda is worth preserving and worth telling stories about, but yes, we should also address reality. And by opening up this outreach program, it's like they're literally putting a foot in both of those worlds to tell stories going forward.
There's one line that stood out to me when I was watching Black Panther, and that's when Eric said,
"Just bury me in the ocean with my ancestors that jumped from the ships, because they knew death was better than bondage."
If that line doesn't speak to you, I don't know what will. I think that that was really the defining line of this film as a whole. This African culture that they're talking about and highlighting really is something that I don't know that has been highlighted or recognized or put up on a pedestal the way that it should be. And when Black Panther came out, I think it brought a lot of people together. And it really gave this culture the honor that it deserved.
When you said you would take me to California for the first time, I thought you meant Coachella or Disneyland.
Infinity War was a beautifully balanced movie. Everybody had their place, they had their scenes, and that was the impossible task that was completed.
The hero moment in Infinity War is when the Science Bros show up against Ebony Maw and Cull Obsidian. Because here you've got these two beings that are clearly forces to be messed with, and the overconfident Science Bros in Doctor Strange and Iron Man and Bruce Banner. It's the most pure, I feel, distilled version of Tony Stark that you get, just in he doesn't want to be embarrassed in front of Doctor Strange. He even makes that mention to Bruce.
Dude, you're embarrassing me in front of the wizards.
There were so many different elements from the other movies that had to come together for this. You've got in Infinity War 30+ actors who have to be on screen working together as an ensemble group, but at the same time, you've got them having to work as individual character. They've got to connect with the fan who loves that character. And then on top of that, you have a juggernaut character like Thanos that could fall into the trapdoor of the whole movie just being a Thanos movie, but they didn't.
Avengers Infinity War is full of just epic, amazing, just comic book brought to life moments. But the one that stands out, it is Thor's arrival in Wakanda. The Avengers are finally starting to maybe lose this battle against the Outriders, against Thanos' army, and then all of a sudden, Thor drops in. The Avengers theme song plays for maybe only the second time in the movie because it hasn't been going the Avengers way. Thor is just like, yo, I brought the lightning, I brought the hammer, I'm about to put it down, and Rocket Raccoon and Groot are with him. It's the first time they're all back together since Ultron, and Thor comes in and says, "Bring me Thanos!" Thanos was kind of weird, but we liked it, and it was an awesome moment. It's probably one of the best moments in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe to date, and it was just incredible, and I cannot wait to see how they all come together in Endgame, and I hope there's a moment even half as awesome as this.
A moment of the MCU that I feel, if you were to describe someone what the MCU is like, it's that scene.
You've got characters that people love. They've loved their whole lives, tracking them through 15+ years of MCU movies, and then they come to this one pivotal moment in Infinity War, and then when Thanos, at the snap of his fingers, half of those characters that people love are gone. That's a massive, massive ending. This was a huge gut punch. To be able to pull that off, yet at the same time still tee up the movies coming after it and leading into Endgame beautifully, that is something that is very tough to do, and they nailed it.
Come on, get some, get some, get some! Come on, get some! How much for the gun?
Not for sale.
Okay, how much for the arm?
Oh, I'll get that off.
Ant-Man and the Wasp, like the first Ant-Man, has the unenviable task of following an Avengers movie. It is about Scott Lang and the Hank Pym family rescuing Janet Van Dyne from the quantum realm. The quantum realm is that world you get stuck in if you shrink too far down. They go and rescue her. She has some weird quantum powers now and knows things about time vortexes. And this is all really important because people figure it's going to factor into Endgame somehow, since Ant-Man is in that movie. And also because it opens up literally this entirely new world for the MCU to explore, either in Endgame or Phase 4 and beyond.
One of the really cool things that Ant-Man and the Wasp did was introduce a villain like Ghost, because Ghost was a victim of circumstance, and it made her such a compelling character, and I'm really excited to see what they do with her in the future, because she has so many possibilities after the way her story wrapped in Ant-Man and the Wasp.
So if we're not counting every time that Luis is on the screen, my favorite scene from Ant-Man and the Wasp is actually the first time we see Wasp in action. Wasp is a pretty valuable hero in her own right, and she does some really cool stuff, like she throws a giant salt shaker and she runs along the side of a butcher knife. It's pretty dope.
Not a good idea to be out in the open like this.
Relax, no one's gonna recognize us.
What, because of hats and sunglasses? It's not a disguise, Hank. We look like ourselves at a baseball game.
So Captain Marvel essentially brought the boss of space, Carol Danvers, into the MCU for the first time. She got her own movie. Now it's set back in the past. So one of the best things about it actually is that not only does it introduce a new character, and in fact the most powerful MCU character ever now, but it also brought the entire Skrull race with it. That, as we've seen in the movie, opens up a whole list of possibilities, plot lines, all that stuff for the future of the MCU.
Captain Marvel was very secretive in the marketing that they were putting out, so you didn't really know what the plot was going to be. And then one of the big twists in the movie came with this awesome scene with Ben Mendelsohn, who's playing who we thought was the villain in Talos. He basically kind of twists what you know on its head and reveals new things to Carol Danvers about her past that she didn't know before and where she came from, solving a lot of mysteries and basically kind of turning the movie on its head and who the bad guys are and who the good guys are.
So not only did we get this ultra powerful hero, it also gave us a huge surprise in showing the Tesseract. We see it originally was held by Mar-Vell. In this movie, Mar-Vell is kind of gender bent and flipped, and this character ends up wanting to help the Skrulls, and she's going to do that using the power of the Tesseract. And then we also are still wondering how it gets from here to then where we initially see it in First Avenger.
My favorite part of Captain Marvel is actually at the end of the film. She taps into her binary power and she basically goes like Super Saiyan. And just to see her not tap into that power necessarily out of a negative anger, but celebrate it with joy and use it to help the people around her, I just thought visually that was such a triumphant moment for Captain Marvel, and I was really excited to see it.
Prove you're not a Skrull. Back to me.